The first portable water bottle may have been laid by a bird. Around 60,000 years ago, people living in southern Africa were using ostrich eggshells as containers. A small opening could be made near one end, the contents removed, and the shell cleaned before it was filled again, this time with water. Add a stopper made from grass or another soft material, place the egg inside a sling or carrying net, and an object designed to protect an unborn ostrich becomes a 1-liter canteen. Nature had manufactured the difficult part: hard shell, waterproof interior, narrow opening, conveniently portable, provided nobody dropped it while being chased by something with better legs. But the eggshell is only the part of the story that survived. Ancient humans transported water in animal skins, stomachs, bladders, gourds, bark vessels, wooden containers, woven baskets, pottery, and probably several materials archaeologists will never identify. They also used a method even lighter than carrying water. They carried knowledge of where water would be, then placed supplies along the route before they needed them. The real invention was not the bottle. It was the ability to separate water from the place where nature had left it. Before that separation, water controlled movement. A group could hunt only so far from a spring. It could cross only so much dry ground. A promising patch of stone, plants, prey, or shelter might exist beyond the next ridge, but if the return journey exceeded the water available inside the body, the landscape had effectively built a wall. The wall was invisible. It was also extremely persuasive. Start with the physical problem. Water is heavy. 1 liter weighs almost exactly 1 kilogram. That sounds manageable until several people need enough for a long journey through heat, while also carrying tools, food, fuel, infants, hides, and whatever part of yesterday's animal has not yet become dinner. 10 liters means 10 kilograms before the container is counted. 30 liters means someone has accidentally invented strength training several hundred centuries early. Water also refuses to cooperate with bad engineering. It escapes through tiny holes, it soaks fiber, it weakens some materials, it makes poorly shaped containers swing against the body. Wide openings spill when the carrier walks. Narrow openings are harder to clean. A rigid vessel protects the water, but occupies the same amount of space when empty. A soft bag collapses after use, but every seam becomes a possible leak. Heat makes the calculation worse. Water lost through sweat must be replaced, yet the hotter the journey becomes, the more exhausting every kilogram feels. An uncovered opening allows evaporation. A dark container left in direct sun becomes unpleasantly warm. A fragile vessel must be padded, which adds bulk. A container that is too large concentrates the entire supply in one object, turning a single fall into a group emergency. A container that is too small requires several stoppers, several carriers, and several opportunities for something to crack. The best design, therefore, depended on the journey. A short trip from a stream to camp favors a different vessel from a 2-day movement across dry country. A family transporting water for cooking needs more volume than one hunter traveling between known springs. There was no perfect prehistoric canteen, because there was no standard prehistoric day. Then there is contamination. A container can preserve water, but it can also preserve everything living in it. Sediment may settle. Some microbes do not care. Ancient people could recognize bad smells, strange colors, dead animals, stagnant pools, or water associated with illness, but they could not inspect bacteria and parasites. A portable container solved distance. It did not automatically solve safety. This is why carrying water was never one invention made once. It was a long series of local answers. The easiest answer was to use a container that already existed. Large shells could hold liquid. Tortoise shells made natural bowls. Hollow sections of wood or bamboo could become tubes. Certain fruits dried into hard, light vessels. An animal organ was already designed to hold fluid without immediately leaking. Humans did what humans repeatedly do when facing an engineering problem. They looked around for something that had completed most of the work without charging them. The ostrich egg was unusually good. An intact shell is strong for its weight. Its curved surface spreads pressure, while the small opening needed to empty it can later be plugged. The vessel holds roughly a liter, enough to matter, but not so much that one break destroys an entire group's supply. Several shells can distribute risk. If one fails, the day becomes worse. It does not necessarily become final. At Deep Kloof Rock Shelter in South Africa, archaeologists found hundreds of deliberately engraved ostrich eggshell fragments dating to roughly roughly 60,000 years ago. The repeated geometric patterns were not scratched onto useless debris. They belonged to functional containers involved in daily life. That detail changes the object. These were not merely emergency shells picked up one afternoon. The designs show a tradition. People selected the material, prepared it, used it, marked it, and passed knowledge about its manufacture through generations. Some patterns may have identified individuals, groups, contents, or ownership, although archaeology cannot recover the exact meaning. A line survives. The explanation does not. The container still tells us something important. Water transport had become cultural. More recent observations among sand communities in the Kalahari help show how such flasks could work. A hole was drilled, the egg was emptied and cleaned, and the opening could be closed with grass, mastic, clay, wax, or another fitted stopper. The shell might be carried in a net or sling, so pressure was spread across its surface. Some eggshell flasks were placed in caches, allowing water to wait at a location until people returned. We should not assume that every practice documented recently existed unchanged 60,000 years ago. Cultures do not remain frozen because outsiders call them traditional, but ethnography demonstrates what the material can do. Archaeology shows that ancient people possessed the container. Together they provide a plausible operating system without pretending to recover every instruction. And ostrich eggs were regional technology. They worked where ostriches lived. Humans eventually occupied forests, mountains, northern plains, islands, deserts, and river systems where a conveniently enormous bird was not available to package breakfast and hydration in the same object. Elsewhere, soft containers may have mattered more. An animal bladder is light, flexible, and naturally resistant to leakage. A stomach can be cleaned and repurposed. A hide can be folded or cut, its edges pierced, and its seams bound with sinew or plant cord. Grease, wax, resin, tar, or repeated wetting may improve the seal depending on the material and the method. When empty, a skin bag can collapse. That is a major advantage for someone who must carry a full container outward and an empty one home. The disadvantage is that skin disappears. Bone survives. Stone survives almost offensively well. Fired pottery breaks but leaves fragments that can remain for thousands of years. Leather, gut, sinew, bark, and fiber are eaten by microbes, damaged by insects, burned, soaked, crushed, or reduced until an archaeologist finds nothing that still looks like a container. This creates a distorted prehistoric world. Museums fill with hand axes and spear points, so ancient humans appear to have spent most of their time producing sharp rocks. In reality, a cutting tool is useful partly because it can manufacture everything less likely to survive. Wooden shafts, hide bags, baskets, cordage, clothing, shelters, traps, and handles. Stone receives the credit because stone remains available for interviews. Direct evidence for very early skin water bags is therefore scarce. It is reasonable to infer their use from later ethnographic examples, from ancient hide-working tools, from cordage, and from the obvious availability of animal membranes. But reasonable is not the same as proven. Archaeology can demonstrate that people processed skins deep in prehistory. It cannot always tell whether one particular hide became clothing, bedding, shelter, a carrying bag, or a container filled at a river and lost before reaching camp. That uncertainty is not a weakness in the story. It is the story. The most important water technologies may be exactly the ones the ground was least able to keep. Plant materials created another range of possibilities. Bark can sometimes be removed in sheets, folded, stitched, pegged, or shaped into a vessel. Wood can be hollowed, carved, burned, and scraped. Bamboo and other naturally hollow stems provide ready-made chambers. A hard-shelled gourd can be dried, opened, cleaned, and carried with little additional weight. Bottle gourds are particularly revealing because the fruit seems almost designed for people who have not invented plastic. When mature and dried, the outer wall becomes rigid while the soft material inside can be removed. The result is light, reusable, and capable of holding liquid or dry goods. Gourds later became important containers across Africa, Asia, the Pacific, and the Americas. But their deep history is complicated. Plants spread, people moved them. Ocean currents may have carried some gourds between continents. Humans also selected useful shapes and cultivated them. A gourd found in a later archaeological setting does not prove that every earlier population possessed one, and a vessel made from a plant may leave almost nothing behind. What it proves more broadly is that ancient container technology was ecological. People did not wait for one universal design. They learned the useful properties of whatever grew nearby. Fibers expanded the options again. Twist plant material, and it becomes cord. Combine cord, and it becomes a net. Interlace flexible stems, and they become a basket. Line that basket with leaves, hide, clay, wax, pitch, or resin, and a vessel that originally carried roots may hold liquid for at least part of a journey. By the way, if you want to go even deeper into the secret lives of ancient humans, I just launched a full course called The Secret Lives of Ancient Humans. 10 modules, 3+ hours of content covering everything we never talk about on YouTube. What they feared, how they communicated, what hunted them, and much more. Plus an exclusive PDF guide included. Link in the description. See you inside. Evidence for complex fiber work reaches far into the Upper Paleolithic. Impressions in clay from sites in what is now the Czech Republic show that people around 25,000 years ago understood cordage, textiles, and basket-like structures. Twisted fibers survive at other ancient sites only because conditions were unusually kind. The skill was probably older than the evidence. A basket requires planning that begins before weaving. The maker must identify suitable plants, gather them at the right stage, split or soften them, maintain tension, and understand how repeated flexible elements produce a strong shape. A carrying net needs a pattern that distributes weight without allowing the container to slip through. None of this looks dramatic after completion. That is the point. The technology disappears into ordinary life once it works. Carrying water also required solving the problem of carrying the container. A vessel held in one hand costs a hand. That hand can no longer grip a climbing surface, balance a load, carry a spear, hold a child, or help process food. Slings, straps, nets, baskets, and frames move weight onto the shoulder, back, forehead, or hips while freeing the arms. There was no single prehistoric backpack launch event. Different communities developed carrying systems suited to their bodies, terrain, materials, and daily work. A rigid pot behaves differently from a flexible skin. An eggshell must be protected from impact. A large basket distributes several small objects. A shoulder strap allows access, but loads one side of the body. A back carrier handles more weight, but makes the water harder to reach. Even the shape of a vessel changes movement. A round-bottomed container may be easy to set into sand or support in a ring, but it refuses to stand politely on a flat surface. A narrow neck limits spilling. Handles create stress points. A wide body holds more, but shifts the center of mass away from the carrier. Ancient people did not need equations to understand these forces. They had the less forgiving method: experience. A strap that snapped 10 kilometers from water was redesigned if the carrier returned. A seam that leaked was stitched differently. A shell that broke under a particular loading pattern taught everyone who saw it. Each successful container held more than water. It held accumulated failure. Not all water needed to travel with the person. Sometimes the better strategy was to make the journey in advance. Water could be carried to a hunting route, seasonal camp, dry crossing, or resource area and left in a cache. A sealed vessel might be hidden in shade, placed inside a crevice, covered, or buried to protect it from animals, sunlight, damage, and other people. Later travelers would arrive not at a natural spring, but at water deposited by an earlier version of the group. This turned memory into infrastructure. A cache was useful only if people remembered its location, trusted that it remained intact, and communicated the knowledge to those who needed it. The physical container mattered, so did landmarks, route traditions, social rules, and timing. Water might be hidden beneath ground that looked identical to anyone not taught where to search. Recent and archaeological caches of ostrich eggshell flasks in southern Africa demonstrate the principle clearly. Some shells were set aside underground, occasionally in groups. A traveler could distribute water across a landscape instead of carrying the entire mass during one exhausting movement. The technique came with risks. The cache might break, leak, be found, become contaminated, or simply not be where memory insisted it was. Landscapes change, landmarks burn, sand moves. Humans confidently misremember where they placed important objects, even when the object is a phone and the search area is one room. Still, caching changed the calculation. A dry route was no longer limited only by how much one body could carry at departure. It could be provisioned in stages. There was another solution. Carry less because you know more. Expert landscape knowledge reduces the amount of water that must be transported. People can follow animal movements, bird behavior, vegetation, geology, drainage, seasonal rain, insects, and remembered springs. They can time travel for cooler hours, rest during dangerous heat, choose shaded routes, and move between reliable sources. This does not mean every ancient person could squeeze water from a random plant and continue walking through a desert while dramatic music played. Survival knowledge is local. A sign meaningful in one ecosystem may be useless in another. Some supposed indicators fail. Some water sources are temporary. Some are dangerous. Knowledge worked because it was specific. Which hollow still held water late in the dry season? Which spring became salty? Which animals traveled toward a river at dusk? Which route offered shade? Which pool had recently contained a carcass? Which source could support a group rather than one thirsty hunter? The container and the mental map worked together. Natural water sources could also be modified. People cleared blocked seepages, deepened shallow hollows, covered small supplies against animals and debris, and used stones, bark, or branches to improve access. In some landscapes, a damp patch could be opened until water slowly collected. In others, rock cavities held rain long after the surrounding surface dried. These were not portable containers in the ordinary sense, but they turned parts of the landscape into vessels. That distinction matters. Ancient water logistics included water carried by people, water stored at camp, water hidden along routes, and water protected where it naturally gathered. The smartest solution was often a combination. Carry enough to reach the next source. Maintain that source when possible. Cache an emergency supply beyond it. Then teach someone else the sequence. A route was safe only when every link worked. People could also begin a journey already hydrated, travel after drinking at a source, select water-rich foods, and coordinate movement around predictable access. These strategies did not replace carrying devices. They reduced the burden placed on them. Eventually, pottery transformed storage. Some of the earliest known pottery comes from Zhanrendong Cave in China and dates to roughly 20,000 years ago, long before farming became established there. Those vessels were probably strongly connected to cooking, but pottery opened a new category of liquid control. Clay could be shaped into a large container, fired until durable, cleaned, set beside a hearth, and used repeatedly. It was also heavy and breakable. For a highly mobile person crossing rough ground, a pottery jar can feel like carrying a future archaeological fragment. Skin, gourd, bark, shell, and basketry may be lighter. Pottery becomes more attractive when water needs to be stored at a camp, when people remain longer in one place, when transport distances shrink, or when loads can move through boats, sledges, pack animals, or organized labor. As communities became more settled, water containers grew larger and more specialized. Jars could store household supplies. Smaller vessels could pour and drink. Ceramic surfaces could be modified, repaired, or coated. Handles and narrow necks made controlled transport easier. Later societies developed wells, cisterns, canals, aqueducts, and fleets carrying amphorae. But those systems did not replace the ancient question. They enlarged it. How do you move enough water from where it exists to where people intend to live? For mobile hunter-gatherers, the answer might be one eggshell in a sling. For a farming village, it might be repeated trips with jars. For a city, it might require thousands of workers, pipes, reservoirs, and laws deciding whose field receives the flow. The scale changed. The physics remained rude. Transporting water affected more than thirst. It changed hunting range. A group could remain near a carcass longer, travel farther for high-quality stone, visit another community, explore dry terrain, or occupy places where water appeared only seasonally. Containers could support children, injured people, older adults, and anyone unable to make the full trip to a source. Water could be brought to a fire, a hide processing area, a cooking place, or a temporary shelter. It also created work. Someone had to make the vessel. Someone had to fill it. Someone carried the weight. Someone repaired the net, remembered the cache, cleaned the interior, or decided that the smell meant this particular experiment had ended. The ability to move water did not free humans from dependence on it. It reorganized the dependence across tools, labor, knowledge, and cooperation. That cooperation is easy to miss when looking at a broken shell. One person may have drilled the opening. Another knew which grass made a reliable stopper. Someone understood how to weave the carrier. Someone else knew the route. A child learned where the cache was located. An older person remembered that a distant spring failed during a particular kind of dry year. The technology existed between them. This is why a container is more than an object with an empty space inside. It represents foresight. The maker prepares for a need that has not arrived yet. Water is collected here because thirst will happen there. The vessel physically carries a prediction into the future. Humans had already shown this ability in tools made before a hunt and food saved for later. Containers multiplied it. A person could carry resources beyond the immediate reach of two hands. Tools could travel together. Food could be gathered in quantity. Fuel, pigment, medicine, cord, embers, and water could become part of a portable human environment. The container was a tool for carrying other solutions. That may be why its importance is underestimated. Spears are visually dramatic. Hand axes look ancient in exactly the way people expect ancient objects to look. A bag resembles something left beside a supermarket checkout. Yet, the quiet container may have changed human movement as profoundly as many weapons. A spear allows a hunter to reach an animal. Water allows the hunter to reach the place where the animal lives. We will probably never identify the first person who carried water. The behavior may be far older than the earliest surviving vessel. A folded leaf can hold liquid briefly. A piece of hide leaves almost no durable signature. A child watching an adult use a shell does not fossilize. The origin may have occurred repeatedly, in different materials, among different human populations. There was no single bottle age. There were shells beside coasts, eggs across African grasslands, gourds in warmer regions, skins wherever animals were processed, bark and wood in forests, fiber vessels in places rich with workable plants, and clay where people could shape earth and control fire. Ancient humans transported water without bottles because a bottle is only one version of an older idea. Make an empty space, stop it from leaking, carry it into a future where water will not be waiting. Sometimes that space was inside an eggshell. Sometimes it was sewn from an animal. Sometimes it was woven, carved, grown, fired, hidden underground, or stored inside the memory of a root. The materials changed. The problem did not. Human beings could move beyond the edge of dependable water only when they learned to bring part of the water with them, or arrange for it to arrive first. The first road into the dry world was carried one mouthful at a time.